Today we're going to make plant-based Akee and Saltfish with all the goodies to go with it. Before we begin with the Akee and Saltfish, we're going to start with one of my personal favorite things, plantain. It is fantastic. It's nutritious, delicious, is carb heavy, so if you're watching carbs, you should watch these go into your mouth. We're going to cook it actually with coconut oil. I like to give it that added flavor. You can use olive oil or plenty of any others. I like this one because it gives it a nice, sweet sort of flavor. It is high in fat, so this isn't something you want to have all the time, but every now and then it's not that bad. We got to turn this down. You don't want to smoke yourself out. So while that melts, we're going to trim the plantain. It is spelled plantain, but if you have Jamaican friends, they will correct you very quickly. I come from a Jamaican family, so plantain was never a thing, but plantain always has been. And slice it. You don't want to slice these too thin because we're not making plantain chips here, but you also don't want them super thick, making them difficult to cook through. I kind of chop mine on a bit of an angle, honestly. I think that's more habit of seeing my folks do it growing up. You could cut them like little discs, and that will surely be fine. Again, I turn that down a little bit. It's a little smoky, so we'll get that going. And we're turning down the heat because you don't want the heat too high. Otherwise, you'll just cook the outside of your plantain and not... Oh, I just said plantain, for shame. You want to cook the inside of your plantain, not just the outside. So we'll just get that nice sizzle going. You might ask, why start with this? Because it does take a little bit of time for it to cook, as my mom would say, just so. So we'll turn that down a smidge. And we're going to check it periodically just to make sure we're not scorched on one side. All right, next up, we're going to warm this guy up and we're going to start cooking some of the vitals for Akee and Saltfish, your garlic, your onions, your scallions, which are also onions, but green onions. So that's a tomato, or green onion or scallion. One of the perks of cooking your plantain first is, well, you get to snack on it while you're cooking the rest of your meal. Now we're going to begin with our Akee and Saltfish, but first things first, we're going to dice up an onion. A lot of Jamaican dishes, onion is your baseline ingredient. Slice up our onion. Be careful because you want to cook your Akee and Saltfish, but you definitely want to keep it chopped finger free. I am no chef, I'm just somebody who likes to cook a lot. Let's make those nice and small. You don't want big chunks. Get this into a little fryer here. There's something deeply satisfying about hearing that onion sizzle. This is where I wish YouTube had smell-o-vision. There's already a little bit of oil in there. I should touch in a bit more. You don't want to burn our onion. Now it's just a splash of oil, probably about a teaspoon, tablespoon. We'll get those cooking medium to medium-low. Again, it's all about that slow go. Put in a little bit of pepper. That going. And everything is going to end up being cooked in that main piece, our Ackee and our saltfish. And again, while we're cooking our, there we go. As we're cooking our plantain, we're going to check on that. So because I'm using a small burner, it'll take a little bit longer to cook some of these. As you see, some of them are not fully brown across, so it's something to be aware of as you flip. And that's the thing. You don't have to cook it on the first flip, you know, it could go back just to touch it up some more, ain't nothing wrong with that. So when you get your plantain, you definitely want to make sure it's like brown and soft. Almost think of like a banana going bad for those who aren't familiar with plantains. And that's the one you want to cook. Otherwise it ends up being more potato-y, which some of the islands do. Like some Cuban food, I find that one they keep, I guess, greener and it's more starchier, less sweet. If I'm wrong on that, please educate me in the comments. I like to learn. Okay. And while these are cooking, we're gonna dice up some of our other veggies here. We have our green onion, our scallion, pre-washed. Always wash your veggies, because when you're coming from the grocery store, whether you get it from an organic place or not, hands touch it. And we just gotta be healthy, right? So let's just dice some of these up. And while we're cooking, something that's super helpful is if you have small bowls that you can kind of separate your veggies. That way you're able to just kind of like drop things in as you go along. All right, so we're just gonna put these in here. Dice a whole tomato. You can get hothouse, you can get fresh off the vine. There's no real preference here. Get a different knife. You want to make sure your knife is sharp. But when it's sharp, be very careful. A friend of mine who's a chef once told me that the most dangerous knives are not the sharp ones, but in fact the dull ones, because the dull ones will bounce off of things, and that's how you end up cutting yourself. So make sure your blades are nice and sharp. Maybe you're like my old neighborhood that had a guy in a truck that would drive around and ring a bell. Sort of like the ice cream person, but the sharpened blades. The tomatoes will go in late, but we want to have those diced up nicely. Turn the heat down a bit. Onions are getting a little scorched. Next we're going to chop up some green pepper, and that's going to go in immediately. This is a rather big one, so I'll probably only use half of this. And again, pre-washed. All right, all the peppers. So when I decided to go plant-based, Ackee and Saltfish was one of the meals I actually worried about immediately. Again, my family's from the West Indies, Jamaica. One half is Jamaican specifically, and this is like the meal. So I wondered, oh my goodness, if I'm going plant-based, how am I going to enjoy something like this? And a friend of mine suggested a nice alternative to codfish, or saltfish, which is just salted cod. And the alternative suggested to me was something I'd never cooked with before, called heart of palm. It has a nice texture that kind of simulates codfish, and you don't have to add any salt to it. At least I don't add salt. I don't like to cook with salt. Part of going plant-based is also a health decision, and eliminating salt is so key to that. You'll notice some cans here, and cans inherently there's a lot more sodium in there. So as you cut back on salt, you'll start noticing the saltiness of foods in general. So when you have things that do come in cans, you don't have to add because it is already built in. And these guys here, they almost look like these just little tubes. They seemed very strange, like the first time I'd ever cooked with them. They have a bit of potassium, a little bit of iron. This is always the thing when cooking plant-based, is always trying to find where you can fill those nutritional holes. Normally I end up with heart of palms that tend to be bigger, but since these are fairly small, we'll just be able to cut them up and toss them in the pan straight away. Oh, we got one little burner. This happens. It's okay. It could still taste good. We don't know. Don't throw it out. Don't throw it out right away. Don't be so eager to get rid of it, because it could still very well be delicious. In fact, sometimes that burnt plantain that's just before burnt is the best piece. Take the ones that are done here, get them out into our little plate. There we go. This one looks like it could use a bit more, but as long as you have a bit of brown on either side, you should be good to go. The big thing is, as long as you've picked a good plantain, you are off to the races out the gate that way. But if you have picked a not so good plantain, well, I don't know what to tell you. Not much frying is going to make it any better. Now let's add in our scallion. And let's toss in our replacement fish, our heart of palm. Start cooking these guys up, and again, this heat is at about a medium. And now we'll want to add in a little bit of seasoning. So if you have raw garlic, cook with raw garlic. I don't happen to have any, handy, so I'm cutting a little corner, but using a little bit of garlic powder in there. How much garlic should you use? Total personal preference. If you listen to the ancestors, they'll let you know. If you never cooked with garlic powder, I would say start light, try it as you go, and then add a bit more. A little bit of oregano. This is probably about a tablespoon, almost 2 tablespoons. I know, what would make sense? Using a perfect measuring cup, quite possibly, but you're also getting a glimpse of just how I cook. I'll add more actual details in the description below, so you can be fully prepped on the things that you'll need to cook this up. Let's tweak that up a little bit. Check out a little bit of plantain here. Here we go. I'll say we're done with these guys. So this meal, I definitely stand by. Not everybody in my family is plant-based, but everybody is becoming more health conscious. And my mom, who's a Jamaican, I said, hey, I have a plant-based Akee and Saltfish. Do you want to try it? She was skeptical, but I can say with confidence, it's Jamaican approved by at least one mom. That's a pretty big vote of confidence, I'd say. All right. Okay, this is nearing completion. Let's see the peppers and onions. Mix them together. It smells very delicious. And don't forget to close your cupboards. So now that we have the plantain is done, the Akee and Saltfish is nearly done. Well, the Akee isn't in there just yet, but the saltfish side and everything is nearly done. The next up to add to this meal is Callaloo. So those who aren't familiar, Callaloo is not just a riddle. It's leafy green. It's sort of in the line of like a spinach. You can get it fresh, you can get it canned. As you see here, I have it canned. There's no judgment, start where you are. drain off the liquid. This is another one of those instances where you don't need salt because it's in a can. It will have sodium, especially as you start decreasing your salt. You don't have to. I recommend it, particularly if your family's like mine and you have to worry about that sort of stuff. Just drain a little bit of the liquid out. There it goes. So this rich leafy green is high in vitamin A. There's a little bit of vitamin C. There's a lot of iron. You know, that's just the way of these leafy greens. And this is it canned. So if you can get it fresh, which I can from my grandmother's garden, but it's not ready to go just yet. So if you don't have a grandmother that grows this fresh, or you're not in an island that has it handy, go canned, nothing wrong with it. And then next up is our Ackee, also in a can. This is actually Jamaica's national fruit. Very delicious. It's one of my personal favorite things of all time. So once you add in the Ackee, you want to be careful. You don't want to mush it up and you don't want to overcook it. Otherwise it'll end up looking like scrambled eggs, which will kind of confuse your brain because you'll be expecting one thing, get another. Add in our tomatoes first. Give that a little stir-ski. And then next up, for those who've never had Ackee before, it probably looks a little, you're like, what the heck is this? Trust me, it's delicious, it's nutritious. We're gonna let that sit for a bit. We're gonna add in some thyme. Pre-washed, always wash your veggies. Oh, I broke a cardinal rule. I've mushed it a little too much. I'm not a chef, I'm just somebody who likes to cook and definitely likes to eat. So not everything will be super pretty. My whole point is to show you what's easy, what's possible. And if you are trying plant-based and you're brand new, just to have some new recipes. Because honestly, that's half the battle. I'm still working on it, still learning. So I like to try different things, see what can be changed, what I can add to my diet. Because when I first started trying to go plant-based, oh man, it was rough because I didn't have a lot of options of what to eat, and frankly I was probably pretty miserable to be around because I was I was in a deficit with my nutrients. I was probably bored with my meals. So that's the whole point of PB Cooking with Jay, is to show that plant-based cooking can be made easy, can be made affordable, and above all, it's just making sure you have control of your health. When I first made adjustments to my diet, I was pre-diabetic and borderline hypertension. And what's crazy is I was playing basketball like 3 times a week. I was going to the gym 4 times a week. When you look at me, I looked super healthy, but actually when I went to the doctor, got my physical, you know, it was a totally different story. So I knew some changes needed to be made. Salt was cut out, reduced meat, and now basically eliminated it. You know, my latest visit, my doctor really is quite happy with the progress. Like there's not even whiffing distance of pre-diabetes, not even whiffing distance of hypertension, and really the only changes that were made were dietary. Okay, looks like everything is pretty much done. Let's get serving, which is one step close to eating, which is my personal favorite part. To the most important part of things. Let's dish out. So one of the things I did not add to the Ackee and Saltfish was Scotch Bonnet Pepper. I don't always do that, depends on who is going to be eating this meal with me. Not everybody likes it spicy, which is why I omitted it. But if you like spice, it's a really great way to add in some kick. But best believe Scotch Bonnet is not something to play around with. If you're not sure if you like spicy food or not, like somehow you're on the fence about that, maybe hold off on your first time making this meal. I want you to enjoy it first before you start adding in that intense heat. And now we're going to add in some avocado. The good thing about this meal is Ackee and Saltfish can be literally any time of day. Like if you had this at dinner, you'd be good. If you had it at lunch, if you had breakfast, no worries or different. The good thing with this meal, a wide range of nutrients, a lot of amazing flavor. And now you have your vegan Ackee and Saltfish, your Callaloo, your plantain, and a little bit of avocado. Dinner, lunch, breakfast, 11sies, whenever you can have this. It is an amazing meal, one of my personal favorites, and something I eat with a lot of regularity. I hope you enjoyed. Bon appetit, bien provecho, all that good stuff. Don't forget, be kind and do good.